The following audio I'm sharing is in regards to something that happened the other day in my comments. It had me reflecting and remembering the lessons I've learned in relationship with narcissism and how I believe we all have a little narcissistic tendency within us. It's just a matter of whether we have emotional regulation and the ability to control ourselves as humans, as adults. That in this world, it's all duality. Duels against one another, keeping us divided and fragmented in this polarizing realm. To affect the whole, we must ourselves become whole. Contrast simply reveals the imbalance of a whole. So when we focus on the one side, we're fragmented and unable to see the whole picture. And this is what has tripped us all up over time. Along the way, we were tempted out of our innocence and true essence into this nonsense of separatism. All of it was to wipe out our memories from where we left the womb and to replace them with the vision through their indoctrination education system. But not before they implanted and, give us the jibber jabbers to prime the body to disconnect us from our infinite spirit and forget. So you have to understand, you have to prep the body by removing the connection between the heart and the soul, the gnosis, that inner knowing that we all came into this life with. And it's all part of that paper game of life. We all conspired to create and find our way back through to our rite of passage. And we're quickly arriving to that same tipping point again. It's always in the duplicity and the duality. Try not to get caught up in duels with others, because that is the split, the separation, and we're the ones creating it. The hidden hand, it doesn't do anything. We end up doing its dirty work. And even our strength is our weakness, and our weakness is our strength. And the duplicity with the labels the system attempts to disempower us with, that there is always a gift hidden and shown. With their shadow, there is light aspects of ourselves that shine. Never discount your shadow for favor of your light. Because without the shadow, you wouldn't shine. So they complement each other. And the wholeness is about bringing them back together. So when the shadow and light aspects of ourselves shine through, then we can recognize the way the dueling sides are what make up the whole. It kind of reminds me of the movie The Dark Crystal. The Skeksis were the evil beings that were using cruelness to rule over the Geflings. And the Uru, also known as the Mystics, were the good side. And that the whole point of that movie was showing that the shard had to be replaced in the crystal to bring them back, to merge them back to their selves. So they were returned to wholeness, the beings they once were, the Skeks. And to me, that movie says so much. And, people talk about movies like they're prophecy or telling, but I personally believe you have 5 senses, and movies can become so realistic to you that you think you're in the movie and part of it. And so it really heightens and it feeds into your senses in a way that people don't realize that we manifest with that. And so unless you're in your awareness, you're just mindlessly, unconsciously manifesting what you're witnessing and experiencing. How often have you had the music on in the background, or a movie or TV or something for noise, people will say, but the reality is you're being fed information consciously or not. And unless you maintain your conscious awareness and you discern and you're very selective on the information you feed yourself, the data you take in through those five senses, then otherwise you are being utilized to manifest. So again, this wholeness and how, we have to remember something. This is really important. There's a lot of craziness in the world. But if you just slow down and you become the witness and you just observe how much more you actually learn, you start to see patterns. You can connect dots, even in your own life. The more you slow down, the more you're able to see things as they are from a distance, as opposed to always having to participate. It's a choice. It's always a choice. It's like people think they have to choose sides in things, and the reality is you don't. That's just part of the game, to keep you engaged in it. Because if you choose, then you're participating, you're contributing, you're feeding it your energy. You're maintaining the cycle of whatever it is, especially the worst one. Oh, I'm just choosing the lesser of two evils. Well, hello. That means you've got two evils and you're deciding you're choosing evil. Like, how crazy does that sound? And see, nonsense lacks essence. It's void of your senses. According to history, you have to remember that they said that a lot of people didn't know how to read. So in learning to read, which almost is a setup in itself, because people used to retain information. This is, in a sense, the devolution of technology. We used to retain information. We didn't have to read it because we had a more heightened sense of awareness and a better memory. We've actually outsourced everything outside of ourselves, from back then when it was books, to audio, to video, to digital. Like, we don't have to do anything practically. So how are we going to get to know what it is we can do if we don't do, if you get what I'm saying? So learning to read was used to allow people to read their propaganda, kind of a setup. Kind of like now, if you think about how we were indoctrinated into this technology age. And I was discussing the other day how the reverse psychology may have been to encourage rebellion to learn to read, so they would read what they wanted them to learn and believe. Just like the reference in this book, there's a book called Conditions for Total Propaganda and Standard of Living, Culture, Information, Ideologies. There's a man, Sam Gerrans, he actually did a short review on it. It was very well done on his YouTube channel. And I was just impressed about the list he went down. I'll put that in the description. But, again, it's always back to which came first, the chicken or the egg. It's like, we're talking about movies, we're talking about predictive events, but it was programming the people to manifest them. So how many people actually watched and fed their focused energy by turning on sensory transmitters that were influenced and tricked into feeling as if they were part of that movie? You see how that works? When you get into a physiological state, you are experiencing it, and then you're living it and creating it. Anthony Robbins, when I did Date with Destiny years ago in 2008, that was a huge part of learning to master yourself, was getting into the state of what it was you wanted to manifest. And in getting into that state, you're priming yourself. You're creating that magnetic field, the energy attractor. You're magnetizing. You're drawing it to you because it is you. That's what the state is all about, is getting into that state, is making you it, the it that you desire, that you want to manifest. And so we have to consider that technology started with books. We had the technology within us all along in the beginning. We were the technology. And now we're at a point where people are afraid of AI when we are essentially the original architecture. We are the original architect that our bodies and our beings are so much more robust than anything that we outsource to. So just in the introduction of books, if you can consider that was a form of technology back in that day, that instead of thinking we've evolved, we've devolved. That what you used to remember and your ancestors used to pass on as story, ritual, legacy, all these proverbs, these things that we hear about now that we don't hear from word of mouth. It's not passed around a campfire. It's not, the elders are no longer passing it on to us. The reality is that we lost that because of the advent of books, the advent of computers and recording devices that now we recognize can just as easily be destroyed and rewritten or written over or completely erased from history. So the victors always tell the story of the past. Doesn't make them the victors or the better people. It's the ones who actually have the technology available to control, which controls us. So that's just one thing to think about. But the rest of this audio, which I didn't mean to go into that depth, but we can talk about that more on the next time. So how to spot narcissistic behavior. How would you handle negative comments when you're a social media influencer? And can you recognize even the slightest bit of narcissism in yourself? Because again, this is something I like to share and discuss, the importance of deconstructing and decoding yourself, getting to know yourself so well that you don't dismiss the obvious. You don't dismiss your shadow, your dark, your whatever, like ignoring the fact that maybe you have some shitty behaviors sometimes doesn't make you a better person. It actually, you rob yourself of the awareness of self when you don't acknowledge even your worst aspects and how important it is to own it, whatever it is, not to shame or blame yourself. That is not you're not here to pick on yourself, and you're not here to allow others to do it to you either. When you know better, you do better. The point is when you know better, you know yourself better, you can change, you can challenge yourself to become the better version of yourself. You're not here to compare or to be someone else, although other people will mirror back to you what it is you like or dislike. It's not external to you. We magnetize, we attract it because it's in us. At some level, we have to find out, we have to decode ourselves to the point where we go, oh, there you are, you little gremlin, you. Come on, let's work together on this one. Because when you own yourself as a whole being with all these different aspects, these personalities, these traits that you carry around in this human existence, the stronger you are. That it won't own you, and it won't rule you, it won't dictate, it won't run the show. This is mastery over your mind, mastery over your BS, your belief systems. Your biggest addiction is to your belief systems. That's the dogma that everybody's fighting over. This is why people go to war, to defend, to offend, to impose themselves upon others. When in reality, you know what? We can all do our own thing and be happy as long as we're not bothering other people, harming people deliberately. They say misery loves company. Happiness and joy do too. So you get to choose which it is you participate in and do. So enjoy the show. I just thought it was funny that he was actually, because people do that shit and they really think they're getting a rise out of you, but they're the ones getting off on it. You know what I mean? Even though this is the one thing about technology, you can't guarantee that what your story is in your head matches what's the reality on the other end. Oh, that's a good one. You can't guarantee what is in your head is really what's truly happening on the other end. This is how technology trips people up and why people are so out of touch with reality, because they're looking for something to happen, they never will see. They only create it in their heads as a false sense of reality. So here he is thinking, oh, I tricked you into responding to my comment, like this whole game that he was playing with his own rules and like whatever. And I just was like, I was just curious. What did he mean by liar? You know, like, what are you talking about? What reference are you going to? And then he's turning around and goes, see, I thought I could trick you and get your attention. And I'm like, okay. So maybe I thought you were going to, you know, I had no doubt. That's why people comment the way they do, because they get off on that shit. And then here he is, and there, I got you again. And it's like, and then he's like, just stop or whatever, which is a total narcissistic response, like I told you, because I've been around that enough. They just try to take control over you, and as if they can direct and guide and like, you know, be an authoritarian over you, which is so freaking crazy, especially across technology. So I admit, my little narcissistic inside of me was like, by the way, thanks you, because it's not that you actually won, you actually supported me, you served me. So when you thought you were playing a game, that you were getting my attention, or, you know, like pulled me into your den, you were in the fucking lion's den already when you started. And I said, thank you for supporting my algorithm. I mean, seriously. That's what, you know, people think they're getting one over, and it's really getting over on themselves. And that's essentially the narcissist. The narcissist that it cannot see through their own shit thinks they have control of their external environments, right? Like a lot of people who are in victimhood mindsets, that's what a narcissist is. They think they're a victim to their environment and to the external, but it's really to their internal. And so in their mind, they think that if I can control somebody or something or my external environment, then I've got control. And it's such a false sense of reality. So in reference to when you said, you know, if they could be healed, of course they can. The reason you don't necessarily see it is because a person who heals themselves is no longer a narcissist in that sense. They've reclaimed their essence, right? There's the nonsense versus the essence. The person has reclaimed their essence and seen, oh my gosh, I was playing into the hidden hand. I was playing into the game, into this like false sense of like a victimhood status. Like I thought something outside of me had control over me, but it was me who was out of control within me. And so therefore I was compensating by trying to gain control of my external environments in order to appear to have it all together inside, in there. And that's the reality. Now, the ones that we tend to notice are just on the far extreme end, so deep in it. Even though I've heard things like, you know, some psychiatrists, psychologists say that they can't recover. And there are some people out there, they have their own like channels and social media, and they claim to be narcissists, and they will express and explain, like they're fully in awareness of it, and will explain how it is they take advantage of people. Now, honestly, we all have it. We all have everything, or we wouldn't notice it. We can't look at somebody and say, oh, you're a criminal, you're a this, you're a that, without having a little of that inside of you. If you spot it, you got it. You can't know it unless you've done it, been it, you even imagined it. Doesn't mean you are out of control or it controls you. It's just an awareness of you. The awareness of you is what keeps control over you. And that's why I always try to talk to people about, like, you got to decode yourself. You got to know thyself. Because if you don't know thyself, you are the easiest person to trip up and get one over on. Because you're dismissing the aspects of yourself that you don't want to associate with. Which is why you don't want to associate with other people who are like that. Because that brings that out in you. So by bringing it out in you, you have to be accountable. Like, take personal responsibility that the reason that that person's showing up to you that way is because that's an aspect of you. That's why people mirror themselves to us, because they are us. And then it's this funny, interesting little game of like, I don't like her because she's a bitch and she does this and she does that. And it's like, do you ever think that maybe you might be like that sometimes and you just don't like it because it reminds you of how icky it feels inside of you, but you don't recognize it on a conscious level because you've dismissed it as if it's not a part of you. And that which you deny in yourself, what you suppress will express until you address. But the funny part is most people can't see past their own shit because they're in such denial. It's the one thing that is, again, like I said, the shit show. Your shit shows unless you own your shit. If you don't own your shit, everybody's flinging shit in this crazy life we call a shit show. Because everybody's shit shows. And that's the truth. The question is whether or not you see your shit. Anybody who's suppressing it is so oblivious to it because that's what they don't want to look at. It's like a child with blinders on. It's the cognitive dissonance. If I don't look at it, it doesn't exist. But just like when you push a ball down under the water, it comes back up much stronger because of the resistance. The resistance is just as powerful as the acceptance, even more so, because most people are pushing away more than they're pulling toward them. So I believe, yes, of course, narcissism is something that can be treated and can be cured. But the average person that has even a little bit can see it because of that. We see it because we are that. And when we don't see it, well, we could still have that too. But yeah, the narcissist is definitely an interesting, it's just a small aspect of every single person. It's not a negative thing. It's whether or not it is the ruling aspect. Just like planets in the sky, our astrology, right? What is the strongest aspect in your chart? It's like, what is your strongest personality in you? What precedes you? How about that one, right? What precedes you? People immediately know you're coming. And what's the first thing they think of when they think of you? It never hurts to ask the people closest to you, what do you see as my strong point? When you think of me, what comes to mind? What do you say, about my weak spots? Like, what do you think I could work on more? What do you see as my strengths? What are my weaknesses? And please be honest as much as possible. Like, what's the first thing that comes to mind? And it's really humbling when you ask people for feedback, because especially honest, true friends, they're going to be like, wow. And then they're going to want to know too. They're going to ask you the same question because it reveals so much more that we may not even see because, like I said, you're so deep in it, you can't see past it. And so those are really great exercises to do with your closest friends. I wouldn't just do it with anybody unless you really, those people are going to tell you. And be willing to hear what they have to say. You got to listen with a willing ear that says, I'm open to hearing it because I'm willing to confront it, address it, even maybe change it. But first, before you're asking the question, ask yourself, what am I willing to give up? And what am I willing to see in myself? Like, are you truly open to feedback? That's really the truth. Like, not everybody can handle it. And so you never ask a question you don't want the answer to, right? But a lot of people do.